Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. It's the first of the month, which means we're ready for some really hardcore questions. This one is a question that I actually came up with myself. I've written a lot of rules questions in my day, and when I say that one of them is my favorite, you know it's going to be good. So let's take a look. Amy controls conversion. Then she plays Blood Moon. Her only land is Volcanic Island. What are Volcanic Island's types? Okay, so this is a pretty straightforward one. We've got two continuous effects that want to change Volcanic Island's type from what it is now to mountain or plains as appropriate. We'll apply them in timestamp order. So first conversion is going to make it into a plains, and then Blood Moon is going to make it into a mountain, and that's what we've got. Now, that was kind of cool, but I wouldn't call it best rules question I've ever made up cool. So let's do something else. Okay, next turn, Amy is going to play Underground Sea. What are both lands types at this time? Now, this is something that was really awesome when I first came up with it, and it's still blowing my mind a little bit even today. You see, unlike in the previous scenario, Underground Sea is not a mountain normally. And that means that if we apply Blood Moon first, that will increase the number of objects for conversion to apply to. Therefore, we can say that conversion is dependent on Blood Moon, and instead of going by timestamps like we did earlier, we're going to go first Blood Moon and then the dependent conversion, which means that both of Amy's lands are going to turn into mountains first and then plains. When I first thought of this question, it blew my mind that the simple act of playing a land could change whether a dependency existed or not, and therefore what types all of Amy's lands would be. That's so cool, isn't it? Now, a couple of you might be wondering, well gee, that seems a little bit cool, but isn't it also sort of dumb? I mean, shouldn't whether one continuous effect depends on another be a property of the continuous effects themselves and not on what cards might or might not happen to be on the battlefield at any given time? So that was a really interesting question that comes up from this. And the reason why that is not the case is thinking about some practical concerns. So let's imagine that that was how the game of Magic worked, and continuous effect dependencies were absolute, a property of just the continuous effects themselves and not of what cards were on the battlefield. That would mean that in order to evaluate whether one continuous effect was dependent on another or not, you would have to know what every single card in the format did and whether any of them might possibly create a game state where one of them would be dependent on the other. Obviously, this was completely impractical for a judge to be expected to do, and so we have the situation that we have currently, which is, if two continuous effects are dependent or not, is dependent not on only the continuous effects themselves, but also the specific game state that they are a part of. And that means that some situations, like this one, can come up where if you play a land or do something else in the game, you might change whether a dependency exists or doesn't exist. And therefore you might change what a card does or doesn't do, or whether it is or isn't affected by a continuous effect. I thought this was amazingly cool when I came up with it a few years ago, and I still think it's my favorite rules question that I've ever written. What's your favorite rules question? Whether it's one that you made up yourself or that you heard somebody else tell you and thought was a really awesome interaction. I'd love to hear them because I definitely take viewer requests. In any case, that's all I've got for you today. Hope you have a great rest of your day.